Shane and. All right, guys, we're gonna call the meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, August 26th. Village Bottom Planning Board and our Federal Review Board. So we're gonna, before we get started, we can have an attendance and then we'll jump into the agenda.
Okay, Pam Nelson. Here. Eric Talbot.
Here.
Michael Aronson. Here. Carla Elliott. Here. Angelica Dennis. Here. Holly Thurston. Here. And Chair Roy.
Here. All right, so that is 7 present. So all members present will and alternates present will be voting members today. The minutes from the last meeting were sent out. So do can I have a motion and review them to approve the minutes from the July meeting?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All right, any objections to that? There are none, so those, that motion carries, the minutes are approved. And we will, so I'm just a quick little agenda order thing, order change here. So the first item, we have a local law, chapter 270, conversation. So we're gonna push that to the end of the agenda and we'll jump in just so that the applicants who are here can start presenting sooner and wait less. So we're gonna start off then with item 2, new business, letter A. This is Planning Board 11/2024 for 10 Marble Place. And this is an extension request for a previously granted subdivision. This is the first request for an extension. So yeah, JB, so can you just give us a quick update on where you are and why we're, when do you expect to have the final plats and everything ready for?
I think the plat is done. We're waiting for the surveyor to get an update, the topography and some other information. That is done, so that will be, the next step will be filing. And he also having more ready to separate the utilities. That was one of the conditions. That's already done. So
Okay. What's the duration of the extension? What's the
So
maximum duration?
they're 90 days.
It's 90 days. Okay. And you expect this to be ready within that 90-day period?
Well, so the subdivision. So they'll probably be back before this board because we still need to get this, you need to submit it to us. We'll have to review it to make sure you have, the conditions are correct.
Yes.
Then Seth will sign the subdivision
Okay.
plat before, wait, just for the record itself, because we don't even have a final plan signed by you because there's conditions associated with that plan.
Okay.
Then Seth can sign the plat and then it goes to Westchester County,
Right. Okay.
right? So I think it's gonna probably be more than 90 days.
Okay.
This is all said
Fair
and
enough.
done.
Okay, so, board members, any questions on the extension request? All right, there are none. It's an extension request. There's no public hearing requirement. Can I have a motion to approve the extension?
Michael Aronson, motion to approve the extension. Try to be a second motion.
And we'll do a roll call.
Okay. Pam Nelson. Here. Eric Talbot.
Aye.
Michael Aronson.
Aye.
Carla Elliott.
Aye.
Angelica Dennis.
Aye.
Holly Thurston.
Aye.
And Chair Roy.
Very good, thank you.
Can I just remind everybody, I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner. If you're gonna speak on any application tonight, just please make sure you sign in. And also for the record, sir, would you be able to introduce yourself?
You can throw your voice really well.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
Doppelganger over
Okay, so next up is going to be 31 Maurice Avenue, and this is a BAR request.
I thought it was an hour between.
No, you're still there, so you can introduce yourself.
Yes.
And the prior.
You'll be remember the start of this project.
All right, and so we'll get the drawings put up here. I understand this was a fire damage property.
Yes.
And if you can maybe just give us a rundown of what the proposed changes are
This is
that we're doing.
it's been kind of a lengthy process. This rundown property that went on fire. It was just a replacement of the existing conditions. Then we found out that it was not a two-family, it was a one-family. So that's what triggers some of the window location changes. We have relocated some of the windows because they didn't fit in the original layout as a two-family, as a one family. And that's very much it. We are going with the honey plank. And if you go down, you see. That the existing, or was the before one on fire,
Sure.
and this is what we're proposing.
So you're legalizing it as a two-family?
No,
It's not, okay, but there's two front doors?
yes, there's this one stuff. So if you go back to the plan, it's still one family.
That, I think you passed it.
Yeah.
All right,
It's just still keeping the two doors.
so the first floor, there's a door into the stairwell.
Yeah,
Joe's already reviewed these plans, I
Yeah.
presume. So let's go back to the elevations. Just kind of describe the material, and then I'll ask for board member feedback. This, yeah, it's
Yeah.
the proposed.
typical, yeah.
So you're changing the porch as well, right?
Yes,
You're going from it was maybe, sorry, to make you flip back and forth, just see what's the front, yeah, so, okay, so it was like
yeah,
a
it was like a
flat
brick, and
gable.
yeah. We followed that kind of roof work better with it.
And you're also changing the fenestration on the upper floor, so you're going from 2 windows to the 3.
Mhm.
And you're organizing this,
We
the
like-
roof
we like
line is
the
changing,
window.
right? So. You just describe what you're doing, because it looks like on the existing, there's maybe just a little longer overhang. It looks like that side elevation, that roof is in a couple of different planes. And it's. in a
It's
single
the
plane.
roof, yeah, it's the roof that. We're not changing, which is keeping the door, and because of the room layout, again, we eliminated those 2 windows. And that's the side view from the portico. And we were trying to align the windows with some symmetry, make sure that they all egress window.
In the original, there were not 2 doors in front. And now there
Yes,
are.
there were.
Oh, because I'm not.
Yeah,
that's-
it's just
that
the
was-
way it's
Oh,
shown.
okay,
That's correct. We're not adding a door, that's all it's been.
okay.
Where was the second door? Yeah, that's a good question. You see in the photo? I only see one door on the front.
That was another door there.
Was that?
I thought it was another
Yeah.
door, that when we were there, when we did the as-built, that's from Google, so we did an as-built. And they showed 2 doors.
And the reason why those windows are so small on the side, I know you have to reconfigure to meet room
Yeah,
size,
there are
but
bathrooms and.
those are bad.
Yeah,
Okay.
Is there one other side elevation?
Yeah.
So on both sides, so there is some sort of a shift on on that
Mhm.
roof.
yeah,
Are you reframing the roof? Because there's an overhang. You look at the existing right elevation on the right side of that drawing.
In this side.
Yeah, it's a different gable. Something is changing. But, right, but when I look at the rear elevation, yeah, it does look like it's getting taller.
the,
If you look at if you look at the rear elevation, right,
we're not reframing
it looks different. Maybe you just count the siding, the number of cladding boards on the siding.
maybe the fact that it does look tall, you're right, I think the window, the whole proportion is a little bit different, yes. But the roof is not changing that. Basically the bottom of what we can.
Okay. I mean, I'll be honest, so when I looked at the drawing, when I looked at the front elevation, I just assumed it was a two-family. It looks like a two-family because it's got 2 front doors.
We did too, and so.
Right, I know, but you're reconfiguring it to match with the existing one family CO. And I'm not even worried about the CO, I'm just like looking at it aesthetically in the BAR, it's, you know, we're looking at, you know, a one, I'm assuming it's a, what's the zoning district here? This is a.
This is the main file.
As a,
Yeah,
no,
that's the S75.
But I think
Yeah.
what we had discussed was that it was being used as a two-family, but we couldn't trace by what means and how far back that use was. So
Right.
we said we are considering it a one-family.
Right,
That's what would be permitted to be there.
okay, I
I
mean,
do
and just
understand, I mean.
from a
we can
BAR
replace-
perspective, as a one family house with the two doors.
We can replace the door with the
With the
window.
window,
Yes,
yeah, I think that would just. Look more appropriate,
Mhm.
um,
and you're removing, it looks like two doors in the foundation on, I'm not sure which side of the property it is, but in the original drawing, there were two sort of basement. I think
This one's here.
no, it's in.
That's the other side,
Keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, those
Yes.
two doors, or the, well, ones with, are they windows or doors?
That looks like
or
both are
windows and doors, no, that's just.
Those are not doors.
That was
doors.
a door.
That was-
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
they're
it's
gonna
no
be
longer a
windows.
door.
All right, and this gray, this is a rendered elevation, right? So you're proposing the gray
Yes,
siding, the white
I
trim,
believe the color there is pewter and gray.
okay. Moving back to the front elevation, looking if there's another window type that we can reference. Just, yeah, to the proposed front, if
I
one of
would,
those,
I would say align the window with one above
okay,
and keep the same size as the double window. Then we keep in the symmetry and,
is the door opening this, does it currently match the window that we're opening on the
no,
second
you
floor?
probably will have
It's a
the,
little narrower, right?
yeah. So you might will have to enlarge the opening.
All right, yeah, I mean, just I mean, I think that the materials are pretty well described. Just any other comments or questions from the board? All right, can we, have a motion to open the public hearing?
on first motion to open public hearing. John, Leanne, second.
All right, any objections? No objections or any public hearing? Is there anybody in the room to speak to this application? I don't see anybody. Is there anybody online who would like to speak to this application? You can use the hand raise function on Zoom. And I do not see any hands. Now, it looks like the elevations are appropriate. I think that the one question was related to the door. I think, I mean, it seems like we can describe it pretty straightforwardly, as a condition of approval. I just don't know if there's I guess Joe would be the arbiter of that change.
So, so no, when the change comes, we would require them to make the change before you sign the thing.
No, okay, understood. There's no site plan on this one, so.
I mean, I'm the ARV.
The ARB,
Yeah.
just before I signed the resolution. Got it. Okay, so with that in mind, can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
On first motion to close public hearing. John, Leanne, second.
All right, any objections to that? There are none. Okay, so then I think that the goal would be to approve this with the condition of swapping out and I think we're talking very specifically, not, we're talking about, there's a door in front of the stairs which would remain, and it'd be the second door, which would be, we'll just call it on the right side of the drawings. Which would align with the right window and match the right window above. All right, so can I have a motion to approve the application with the notice condition?
Michael Aronson, motion to approve the application with the conditions as described.
How many you second the motion?
And a roll call.
Okay, Pam Nelson. Here. We're
Aye.
voting, is it aye?
Aye.
Yeah. I want to put words in your mouth. Aye. Eric Talbot,
Aye.
Michael Aronson,
Aye.
Carla Elliott,
Aye.
Angelica Kanganis,
Aye.
Holly Thurston,
Aye.
and Chair Boyd.
Aye. All right, very good. So,
Thank you.
thanks, JB. We're gonna go on now. All right, so next up is a new application for 34th State Street, and then we have the applicants here tonight. And so I'll call them up in a moment. I think that our goal tonight is really just to get an overview of what's being proposed, let everybody on the board kind of get a sense of what the plan is over here. I know also that there's talk right now, we're trying to plan a site visit to take a look at this site, so hopefully we can get all the planning board members out there to kind of better understand what's happening. So I think with that, I'd like to call the applicant team up. You guys can work with Control Maddie here on the computer to work us through the slides and welcome.
So, good evening, Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Janet Harris. I'm a partner with Bill Bello, Denell, Weingarten, Wise and Whitaker, and I'm here this evening on behalf of the applicant, WB 34th State LLC. As you may know, they are a related entity of WBP Development. You may know them as the developer or redeveloper of the property currently under construction at 30 Water Street. They had such a great time with you on that application that they decided to come back, and we're now looking at the redevelopment of the property at 34 State Street. You may be familiar with that property. We were before you for a number of years in connection with the proposed redevelopment of that site. 34 State Street, it is approximately 5.9 acres, and it's a through lot with frontages on State, James, and Hunter. And it is the home of the former Printex Corporation office manufacturing facility, which was office and manufacturing. That building has since been demolished, and currently on that property is the Smith Robinson House, which we have talked about in the past as being a historic building, and it was constructed in the 1840s and is in a great state of disrepair. So again, we were before you in connection with proposed redevelopment a number of years ago that never happened. But that application was the subject of an environmental impact statement. A finding statement was adopted for that. And that was a larger project than what's being proposed here. And so the only reason that I'm mentioning that in that context is that there was a larger project studied here several years ago for which there is a finding statement that was adopted. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what the project is, then I'll introduce Jim Wendling, who is the COO with Gibraltar, with WBP, and then we'll introduce our architect to present it to you, and then we're here to answer any questions and to talk about the comment memos that we received. We did receive them. We're in the process of digesting them, and we will be prepared to provide answers to you before your next meeting. So just briefly, again, there will be the construction of 3 new buildings. One will be, 2 of them will be 4-story multifamily buildings, one containing 52 units, the other containing 48. And a 3rd building, which will be a 6-story multifamily building containing 50 dwelling units. And then the Smith Robinson House. So the Smith Robinson House, we're not really sure exactly what's going to happen with that yet. Our architect might be able to talk about that in more detail. Because of the state of disrepair, we're not sure if that is going to be repaired, if it's going to be deconstructed, reconstructed. We're trying to preserve as many of the elements as we can of that. So there are a number of different applications that we have for the village, and I can just mention those to you briefly. So before this board, obviously, we're hoping that you'll be lead agency for purposes of environmental review of the project, and we hope you'll declare intent to do that this evening. There will be site plan approval from this board, a conditional use permit for residential dwelling units on the property, and tree removal permit. We also need Board of Architectural review approval. The application also requires a planned waterfront special permit from the Board of Trustees. And we also require a number of variances from the Zoning Board of Appeals. We are still in the process of working with your building inspector to determine exactly what those variances are. We know we also need to go to the Historic Preservation Commission and the Environmental Advisory Council. So we're here this evening to just get started. I know that that's a lot to digest, and we hope over the course of the coming months we'll be able to work out all of the details of the project, but in the meantime, I wanted to introduce Jim. He'll tell you a little bit about their company, and then our architect, Michael Davino, will present the project in more detail. So thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Jim Wendling, WBP Development. Maddie, while I speak, why don't you just keep it on page 14?
Of the
Yeah, Mike will
presentation?
go through the whole deck, but just,
got it.
let's, just so there's some context here.
Is that the one?
That's all.
All right.
So, as Janet said, I'm Jim Wendling, CEO of WBP Development. We are currently working on 30 Water Street, and we're nearly done with the brownfield remediation. So it'll be exciting to start seeing that building come out of the ground. Take a long time, but we're excited for next steps there. We are also building right now at 2 developments in White Plains, one in Rochelle. We just broke ground in New Haven, and we have many others in the Westchester pipeline. We're a fully integrated company, so we develop, build, and manage. And this particular site we've been looking at for a few years. We are very excited about it. We're very excited about the opportunity to redevelop what we think is a very important site in Ossining, a very important neighborhood. We have tested it already for environmental contamination. It is contaminated, so we've already made application into the brownfield cleanup program, and it has been accepted. We have not signed it yet, but it has been accepted. We have studied it, our team with our consultants, really what the best execution was for this site or is for this site. And we have ultimately, what you see before you is 150 units. But importantly, 100 of the units are affordable for sale home ownership units. It's a new program that the state came out with about 2.5 years ago. It really fits with the ethos of our company, so we pivoted very quickly to doing a few of these. We have 3 under construction right now, 2 in White Plains and 1 in New Rochelle. We brought the state out, the funding agency who's administering this program, HCR, out to see this site about 4 months ago to see what they thought about it. They loved it because it's vacant, other than the Smith Robinson house. It's, it's a way to take a blighted site and redevelop it. And an important site for, and beautiful views. I mean, it really hit all of the close to Main Street, Transoriented development. The state loved this site. The state was capitalized in 2022 for this program for 5 years. So there's a finite amount of money. They have this in their pipeline. We've made sure that they've added this to the pipeline. And it's important that that's why one of the reasons why we wanted to start the process, because they need to see us start making progress, and you can't start making it until you start. The 3rd building, which is top of the screen, is proposed to be a 50-unit market rate rental building. The amenities would be shared. The exterior amenities would be shared. So there would be a courtyard and a pool that's proposed, and then interior amenities would be separate. The market rate rental building, again, page up on the screen, would have amenities inside the building, and the AHOP building, again, affordable home ownership opportunity program, would have amenities in whatever we rebuild within the Smith Robinson house. That is the intent right now. And I think that site visit, Chairman, has already been scheduled. I think we're going to meet next Friday and next Monday. There's 2 different dates. So we want you guys to be part of the process of reviewing that building with us. I should have mentioned the affordable home ownership condo program is for sale it's set at sale prices at 80% AMI, and it's for household incomes up to 100% AMI. So right now, all of the tax credit rental work that we do is between 30 and 70% or 30 and 80% AMI, area median income, averaging 60. This is for that next window, this next group of people. So to really, and it's home ownership. So to really, we think it's a wonderful opportunity. We have proposed more parking than is required. We think that's important for both marketability and to relieve the pressure on the surrounding streets. So we have, I think, 302 parking spaces. Mike will get into the details, but about 60 more than is required. And it's underground parking. So there'll just be a few surface spaces for visitors, but the majority of the parking is underground. We have also, on the plans before you, have proposed a public park, which Michael will show when we show the site layout. That's kind of open still. That's not firm. It's in discussions. We've met with local stakeholders, people surrounding the neighborhood to talk about what might be the best use of that space. So, right now we show a public park that would be given back or dedicated to the village, but that again is still to be worked out. We have also met with the village engineer and village manager and walked Breakneck Hill, or attempted to walk it. We walked it as carefully as we could. And we've started the process of discussions about what improvement of that area may look like as part of the overall development of this site. So again, we're really excited about it. We think this is a great opportunity. It really hits a lot of the sweet spots of what our company has been looking for over the past 5 to 7 years, which is a blighted site, a transit-oriented development site, a site with strong community support. And we think the combination of the rental and home ownership is really a great execution. So with that, I will turn it over to Michael, our architect, and then again, as Jen said, we can answer any questions you may have tonight.
Good, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Bevavino. I'm a proud Austining resident. My business is also located here in Austining, and I am super excited to be working on this project with Wilder Walter and the rest of the team and you all. Maddie, if you wouldn't mind maybe skipping to slide 3 or 4. Next one. So just to orient you, because everything is pretty much in the same direction. North is up, the Hudson River is to the west. State Street is over on the right-hand side, heading towards Maine. On the south side of the site is James Street, and then Hunter kind of on the other side. And then as you see, the green roof looks like copper, but I think it's just insulation panels. That's what remains of the Smith Robinson house. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So this is what the site looked like. That picture is from 2007, but I think kind of as recent as 2020. One of the things that we tried to do when studying the site plan and sort of looking to lay out the site was to keep most of the development, or as much as possible, in the existing sort of disturbed area of the site. So when we look at the site plan, you'll see the much of the footprint looks kind of similar to where the Printex building was, and that a lot of our impervious surface area is kind of where that existing parking lot and a lot of those to the extent possible, kind of trying to keep a similar area of disturbance. Go to the next page. So this is the survey. The site consists of 3 tax lots. Grade drops off pretty steeply on the west-hand side. And you can see, like, we really tried to keep the development, upland on the street side, and to the extent possible, tried to work with the grades instead of fighting them. If anybody's been down State Street, that like the Smith Robinson house kind of sits up on a hill, and then it's relatively flat as it heads south, and then drops, pretty severely as you go down Hunter. So we go to the next slide. Just a bit about the Smith Robinson house, which I'm sure many of you know pretty well. Unfortunately, it's been left to kind of disrepair. The inside is that picture in the lower right-hand corner. I think is pretty representative of what the majority of the conditions are in there. Our hope is to preserve whatever we can, salvage what we can and recreate what we can't. Whether that's a means, as Bonnie mentioned, of kind of demoing and rebuilding, or trying to re-support and build around. We're still working through that with the structural engineer. But our intent is to kind of capture the spirit and essence and sort of kind of things that make that original structure amazing. So go to the next slide. What I didn't know, I knew that there was a giant Prince building on this site. I didn't know the person who owned and operated it. Vera Newman is an amazing person, iconic. What she accomplished here in Austining with this kind of globally recognized company, I think is something that more people should know about, and I'm really hoping that we can play homage to her in some way in the interiors or, you know, in some way in the final development, so. Might go to the next slide. So this is site plan. The project is made up of 4 buildings. The Smith Robinson House, which is right where Maddie's cursor is, and then that's flanked by the 2 AHOP buildings that Jim mentioned. The condo buildings. And then on the left-hand side of the image is where the 50-unit rental building is. Down along Hunter Street, it looks kind of like a pinkish color on the screen, but that's the area that we're hoping to kind of return back to public park that actually was historic Black Park in Ossining, and kind of excited about the idea of kind of potentially returning it to you know, some form or notion of its former glory. You'll see that we have 3 curb cuts. There's the existing one that we're using on State Street. That one takes you up to the courtyard level. As Jim mentioned, there's a couple of surface parking spaces up there. We imagine that's for like kind of drop-offs or quick deliveries, that kind of thing. And a roundabout that will serve as fire department access and a place to just kind of drop off and pick up people on that main courtyard level. And then we have 2 cuts on James Street that access the 2 different parking levels. If you see the one on the lower left-hand corner gets a little fat when it reaches the building, that's where we envision the trash pickup and you know, all the sort of trash activities happen down in that lower corner. Wanna go to the next slide? This is essentially like a section diagram of the building. On the State Street side, which again is on the right-hand side, it's 4 stories above grade there. We you know, taking some existing measurements, we feel like we can get the building kind of within the existing height of the Smith Robinson House, which is that kind of line poking up behind it. And then below that, you see like the main parking level. As you go to the left, the building sort of steps down with the grade so that we can avoid any kind of large retaining wall or having to do a ton of cut and fill on the site. So I can walk you through what each of those floors look like if you keep scrolling. So the next page, the plan on the right-hand side is the lowest level in the rental building. The little ins and outs are balconies. We want to take advantage of the amazing views of the Hudson River on that side. The next level up, level 2, is attached to a parking garage that will serve the rental building. So the thought is that you're not trying to navigate between the 2 levels. Your parking for the rental building is on this level. So you come in, the residents on that side will be able to walk essentially right into their units or get to the elevator bank, go up and down. You can see the trash room located in the corner of the garage too, at least diagrammatically. We keep scrolling. The plan on the right is the main parking garage. This will serve the 2 AHOP buildings. There'll be an entry into the Smith Robinson House, sort of amenity lobby space from there. On the left-hand side, you can see the courtyard. Again, there's a pool and we're thinking, you know, some seating and benches and, you know, nice area to sit. It'll be well landscaped and that will be shared among all the residents. On that plan, you can also see we're thinking about using that second story of the Smith Robinson House as sort of the main lobby for the 2 AHOP buildings. And then the blue, you see the blue areas anywhere on the plan, that's where we're thinking the amenities are for each building. So they're kind of sprinkled around the plan, especially in the rental building on the left. All of those amenity spaces, with the exception of the lounge next to the lobby, face the water. If you go to the next sheet. So just to mention AHOP building is part of the program requirements is a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. The rental building is a mix of 1s, 2s, and 3s, although we only have a couple of 3-bedroom units on that plan. On the top floor, they're penthouse units, so the ones that you see on the left-hand side, all the way to the left, those are 2-story, 2-story penthouse units that'll have kind of walkout, roof terrace gardens there. Keeps going. So I think we still have some work to do in just selecting finishes and deciding what this building looks like, but we tried very hard to be kind of sensitive to the context and sensitive to the fact that we're glomming onto this historic structure. So our goal is to be kind of harmonious with it and be inspired by it and select things that are kind of in the same tone and spirit as Smith Robinson House while not trying to compete or replicate it. We're also, looking to kind of vary the facade and break down the scale of the building, as well as, kind of create this nice courtyard space that feels, unique and different and a nice place to hang out. And I think that's it.
Thank you. This is obviously a lot to kind of put out there right now, and I don't know if there are any kind of initial kind of just thoughts or questions or reactions that any board members have right now, just to get that out there, and then do that, we can open a public hearing. And I think that we'll probably leave it somewhere around there where we can visit site. I know that, there's been comments from consultants, but I think we're still premature to start going into those right now. I think it's also a little premature to start talking about SECRA, as we're just trying to get a little bit more definition into the project before we get into that phase. But any initial board member reactions, questions, thoughts, anything?
I think it's an exciting project. I guess I was wondering a little bit about the view corridors from State Street. How we were talking about 4 stories in one of the AHOP buildings. And what people will they be able to see? People who are on the opposite side of State Street, for example, what will they see when they look towards the project? Will they see the river or not?
That's a very good question, and I think it's one of the reasons why I'm excited that everybody's gonna go out to the site and walk around and look at it in a different way, because that site kind of existed in my mind in a different way than it does when you're standing down there. And because of the existing topography, you really don't get a view of the Hudson River from anywhere on State until you get further down. So yes, there'll be a new building there that will block the view, but it's not a block of the view of the Hudson. You don't really get a glimpse of the Hudson until you are all the way up Broad Street. I know will be one of the requirements of the board to kind of demonstrate the impact on the view corridor and to do some studies on what the building will look like from various points downtown. That's something we do.
I think that's just for the board, that's one of the variances that they are going to need in terms of breaking up that, because they're proposing that, I'm gonna say that the building along State Street as one larger building where the zoning does require some sort of view corridor, and that is something they will have to also demonstrate, because in the LWRP and in the comprehensive plan, they talk about the view corridors of the Hudson River from Route 9, so they'll have to also work for that. So that's something that, if that is of concern to the board, that's something that is gonna have to get worked into, like, probably a little bit of a design tweak, and so that should probably be brought to the forefront sooner than later.
Yeah, I was sort of to follow up on that. So the AHOP properties, they don't have balconies, correct? And
They do not. Oh, the ones on the ground floor all have walkouts, but they don't have.
patios. Okay, so again, that building that's running along State Street would really just be looking at the rental property as opposed to having a view? I mean, I don't know, maybe on the upper levels that they would have.
Yeah, I think the upper levels, you'll get a view over the top of the rental building.
And it's also angled in such a way.
Yeah,
And I think it'll be very evident when you go out and you look at the existing topography of the property. And then, you look at, for example, things that are right across the street. There's no real view out to the river. And you don't really get that view, as Michael said, until you get all the way up Broad and looking toward down A. And then when you look back at this property, these buildings will disappear into like the tree line, and you won't see very much of those buildings, because at that point, then you're above where the tops of these buildings are. So it doesn't really impact the view. And I think that we'll be able to demonstrate that. And then, with regard to what Valerie was saying about, whether or not there's a variance that's required, I think there's some nuance in the language of the code with regard to whether it's something the planning board has a concern about. And then in that instance, it would trigger a variance, or if there's a determination made that there isn't the concern, then I don't think that variance is necessary. So we'll get to, there are a lot of details to digest here, and we recognize that. We're just getting started with you, but we'll be able to work out those details.
Yeah, no, you go.
No, I guess, this is not an architectural question, it's more just a marketing financing decision to make the market rate unit rental versus a for sale property. I mean, I'm assuming it has to do with market conditions in terms of interest in purchasing. I was just sort of curious, since I know the AHOP obviously is income restricted, but was there a particular reason why you chose to make that third building rental versus for sale?
Yeah, we looked at a lot of scenarios here and just tried to get to the right one, like what subsidies are available, what market conditions are. The AHOP program is capped at 100 units. They made one exception for us, but that was on a high-rise site in the downtown urban area. So it's capped at 100, so we wanted to do the 100 because we think that site warrants that. And then again, just, working on what available subsidies would be available, what making the numbers work on the deal. That's how we got to this. But we looked at 12 different scenarios to get here.
Sure.
Other reactions?
You mentioned a park. Where is the park?
I do want to go back to that one.
There's so many.
No, it's further.
It's here, right?
Yeah, but the site plan shows it in a different color. As we understand it from the village historian, that was the location of an African-American park that was built during the Great Migration. We have shown right now this area as parkland to give back to the village. I think it's important that we obviously speak to you guys and also speak to the neighborhood, which we have started doing, about what the right use is for that space. But as Michael said, we're not developing any of the buildings there. That's on the downhill side of the on parallel to Hunter Street. So it's what we show right now, but this is open for discussion, but we think it's an important piece of the property.
What's the topography? I mean, it looks very steep.
Flattens out there a little.
Yeah, you can see the grade kind of, there's a little bit of a plateau once you get up from Hunter Street. My understanding was that this was like the best park in Austining, which is kind of hard to imagine in its current state, but that there used to be contests way back when for the best park, and that this one was frequently voted, the best park in Austining. So we've scrounged for photos with no luck yet, but
No, we don't.
Yeah.
That's gonna be my next question.
I think it's an exciting project. There's not a lot of ownership being built right now, so.
I was just gonna say, I mean, appreciate the thought and everything that's put into this. This is huge undertaking,
Thank you.
and it's needed.
One of the things that sticks out to me, just as you're kind of looking at all these and having looked at it originally, is just kind of going back to the original house. And I realize there's a lot of questions up in the air with that. but also just kind of looking at the overall composition of the project and making sure that that doesn't get lost or blurred in and just kind of that reading along State Street. I know right now, I appreciate the effort to try to kind of match. You actually, you articulated very clearly, trying to kind of speak to it without, blending in too much. I think that's something that definitely should be kind of thought through a lot during the development of the design is really allowing that house to kind of exist and not feel like it's a giant kind of wall of limestone color and
It's
stuff.
one of the reasons we want you guys there out early.
Yeah.
To be part of that process.
Yeah.
We wish to, ideally be in better shape. It's not. So
Right.
we're gonna do what we can and you guys are gonna be part of that process.
Sure, and two separate issues, right? There's like kind of like, what do you do with it, and what's salvageable, what's not,
Yeah.
versus how, however you
Recreate.
recreate it and how that relates to it.
Yep.
So different issues, but yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Any other comments from the board? Otherwise, I think I'd like to get a motion to open the public hearing. And
There's some in the motion.
right, any objections to that? So is there anybody in the room who'd like to speak to this application tonight from the public? I don't see anybody here tonight. Is there anybody on Zoom? You can use the hand raise function if you'd like to speak to this application. I don't see any hands. I hope as we move forward, we get some public comment on this. So it'd be, I think, really helpful. Okay, so can I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
Michael Rams, a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Let's help that second. Great, any objections to that? Or none, public hearing is adjourned. I think I'm just gonna just turn over, just Valerie really quickly. Is there anything that we kind of haven't covered during this introductory?
No, I mean, nothing that hasn't already been brought up by either you or the applicant. And I
Okay.
think that just the next step is finalizing, like, confirming all the approvals that are necessary, the zoning variances. And then getting started on the secret process.
So looks like we're still not at that point yet, and we're letting those shuffle out.
Yes, and I would anticipate that by September, by your September meeting, all that should be settled, I would assume.
Is there any issue with declaring intent?
So the only thing is that I raised that there was a few things with the EAF part one that was incorrect, and then also the EAF part one has probably not, it doesn't have all the approvals that are required. So if we can get that like finalized, and then we can get that, so next meeting, we can do notice of intent to the lead agency, and then I mean, I'm even happy to like start with like part two or just begin that discussion in the next meeting, but to move things along.
Sounds good.
All right, so can I have I think that's it. The applicant, you have any questions? Good. Can I have a motion then from the board to adjourn the agenda item?
Eric Talbot to make a motion to adjourn the item.
Michael. You second the motion.
All right, any objections? There are none. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much. We look forward to working with you.
Yep. Likewise, thanks.
Janet, I did send I sent my memos to Bonnie so that she's aware of some of the comments that I had.
We did
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I saw it. We circulated it among our
Okay,
consulting group and we're working on.
okay,
Okay.
good.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we're now on to continuing business. The next item is a PAR 14/2025 for 133 State Street. And this is a PAR approval for a new two-family dwelling with on-site parking. So I know we looked at this in May. Actually, no, I think we looked at this in our June meeting. And is the applicant here?
We have a hand raised.
We have a
Mr.
hand, okay.
Veneroso.
This is on Zoom.
Good
All
evening
right,
to the board. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Stephen Veneruso, Curto, Schwartz and Curto, on behalf of the applicant regarding the subject property at 133 State Street. I believe also joining via Zoom is the project's architect, Eduardo Gallarza, who should be on, as well as the applicant.
I see Victor with a hand raise also, right?
All right, we're bringing them in.
And there should also be Mr. Gaillarza, the project's architect.
Yeah, he's coming in.
Okay, great. So as the board had stated, this project was first before this board back in May. Recently, both my office and Mr. Gaillarza submitted some supplemental materials, some modifications, addressing some of the comments, questions that have come up. So I would, at this point, turn it over to the board of any questions they would have directly regarding that supplemental submission of either myself or Mr. Gaillarza.
Yeah, if we could get the elevations put up on the screen, right, then we can, I think. And I think maybe, Mr. Garza, if you're able to just kind of walk through what's changed in the plans, I think that, that'd be helpful. I know the last time we met, we had a couple of comments related to material, kind of related to how the line elevations and the colored renderings spoke to each other, both in terms of material and color and, I'd like to understand how those questions were resolved. And I think we also talked a little bit about the coping at the top of the building and just bringing that up, kind of matching some of the other materials on the building and kind of making that a little bit more of a clearer kind of cap or top to the building, kind of giving a little more substance, just a little more symmetry to the facade. So Mr. Gayer, you're probably the best person to speak to what's changed on the plans.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Yeah, as explained, this project has been hanging around a couple of variances that were resolved very, after a few meetings. The last thing that we submit was based on the revision list number 2 made by Mr. Agostinelli. So I answered his different points, about 15 points. I'm referring to every point, referring to the notes and details on every page of the project. Yes, we did review the elevations, as you can see, as requested by the board, to make the horizontal band in the front, the cap, to be a little bit more wider and the front, and make all colors match the original rendering, which was very light gray and dark gray accents at the corners. So that was basically the latest thing that we did on that. So unless you have, we resolved also the issue of the garage, the parking garage inside the building. There's no more tandem parking in front. And that was basically the issue, that it was brought us for too many meetings, I guess.
So again, just, and I know that, Joe has his own set of comments, which are not related to what this board is reviewing, right? Joe's review is separate.
Okay.
I think that when we spoke last, and maybe I'm just being thrown off by the revision clouds, and maybe those are for Joe and not for this
Yeah,
board.
that's correct. Yeah.
But I don't see, maybe I'm missing it, but I don't see what's changed in terms of the elevations and the coping, or, however we want to call that capping the top. And how that's changed from what we saw last time. And just some clarifications on the material of the lintels, which I think were shown as cast stone in the color rendering, which is an important document for our review, but shown as, I think, like a soldier course brick in this drawing that we have on screen right now, the line drawing. So did those elements change, or are these effectively the same elevations that we looked at last time?
The only thing that was changed and was requested was the horizontal cap on the front, at the top, the cap, that it should be a little bit wider, and we did it about 10 inches wider there. That's the only thing that was requested, and also changed the color to match the rendering. That's what we did. That was the whole comments of the board the last meeting.
Can we look at the renderings?
It should be somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm asking Maddie to pull those up.
Mm, mhm.
Or were they, is it still the original?
Yeah, I think, I don't recall the revisions didn't have
We didn't have
like
new
colored
one.
rendering.
So it'd be the facade, the May 28th. I mean, let's just pull that up just for the,
That's it. That's it. Yeah. As you can see, it's very much, you know, what the board requested to have the colors, and the band in the rendering doesn't look that it was too much change, but in the drawings, it's supposed to, you know, is a little wider, and we did that.
I'm gonna pull
That was for,
drawings.
so my notes say we needed the plans to match the rendering, so if the rendering didn't change, then nothing changed.
right, so the rendering previously and now still shows, I think, different materials over the windows than the line drawings and the orthogonal drawings. Let's, yeah, I wish I don't know if we can really do a side by side on this. No, we can't. We tried.
That's what it looks very, the only thing that the rendering didn't show is the cap being a little bit wider. That's the only thing. Well, we did the cap wide.
Well, I don't think that's true, because I think that one of the questions we had was the sill material, was the lintel material. These, I mean, these are shown as projecting, stone. I honestly, I'm just trying to get a sense of what the actual design intent is here, is that it doesn't seem totally straightforward. And this is kind of the same, not kind of, this is the same conversation we were having at our last meeting. Is that the rendering and the drawings were not in sync, and because as member Lisboa just noted. So I'm just trying to reconcile that. It's just, and including the balcony edges, right? Like this is materially shown. It's not clearly described as I'm sitting here right now. I am an architect. I'm having a hard time understanding what I'm looking at.
Well, what we try to do is just do the same type of material, which is brick, as the corners accents to match the lintels. No, that's the only thing. I remember the request by the board, so we did that, and the rendering doesn't show exactly that looks like that is being resolved, but that's what we did in our drawings.
Maddie, could we zoom in maybe on some of just on the street, the front elevation? So
the top cap is a metal cap, stone cap, but
okay,
it's color is to match the accent, the corners accent. And the lintels are supposed to be brick the same color, but the accent, there's a little dark gray.
and are they all? And so those lintels are flush with the brick. Like we're trying to
Yes.
trying to interpret this.
Yeah, there's a, the only thing it results is enhance the color is like enhancing the lintel.
Is that true for the coining too at the corners?
Yes,
Because they're showing as like they're corbelled out, and then the
yes.
coining is offset on the inside. It's
That's a little bit off the,
and I don't know if that's a drawing issue or if that's really what you're proposing.
on what are the corners?
And both at the corners and also at the coping. You're saying it's a metal cap. I want to be clear. You're saying metal cap. It says on the drawings that it's a stone
This
coping.
is stone cap. Yeah, well, it's a stone cap because we're gonna match the materials very much like the same materials as the other ones that match the color of the accent.
So
The
is
metal
it
wouldn't be
color
that much.
are different things, right? So I'm just like, honestly, I'm trying to get I don't understand exactly what I'm looking at. I think what I understand from what you said, and again, these are drawings, they need to be, it needs to be something where when it's we all understand it and are clear on it, not asking questions about it, but that the material of the coping, it's either stone or aluminum colored like stone, from what I'm hearing. The lintels, I understand you're saying that they're brick.
They're
and
brick, yes.
I guess there's one window there where it shows like a soldier course. And maybe is that what they're all supposed to be?
Oh, the one at the bottom. Yeah, that's, that for some reason that it shows more there than the other and the other lintels. But that's supposed to be like that, like the one at the top of the doors, very much, of the garage doors.
What about at the base of the building? So I don't even know if this came up last time, but and it maybe just be a change where you have the balcony line and there's a banding of material. What's that material?
That's all brick
How about
Oh,
on the balcony itself?
at the bottom. Everything is brick there.
On
Everything
the
is brick,
balcony? So you're putting brick around the perimeter of the balcony?
right? It's face, it's brick face.
The sides are,
So on the fascia, it's gonna be a brick face fascia.
Yes.
Would it be helpful with this board if we have the applicant maybe take the renderings and provide like a materials, like, how you have a call out
Yeah,
of the exact materials, and you
Yeah.
can show images of the materials on the rendering so that it's clear as to what is being proposed where
I think that would be
with
really
colors.
helpful, like a photo or like a cut sheet from the
Yeah.
material they're planning, if it's whatever, Watson Town brick and a little call out, and then. But I also think that you should just resolve the top, be clear about how the corners coining is, it looks nice if you've got them, they're corbelled out, which I think is a nice detail. But then, the coping is offset in, which I think isn't the way that you would actually build it, so it should, if the coping is going to the edge of the. Kind of the outer corbelled brick, then that should be drawn that way. And
But-
just, and have clarity in terms of whether it's stone or metal.
Well, I think,
It doesn't look like the side elevation matches the front elevation. It looks like you changed the thickness on the front but not on the side.
well, the front is the only part that is brick. All around the building, the rest of the building is siding.
No, of course, you have a call out on the side elevation. At where on the right side of what's up on the screen right now, the side elevation, where there's like a 18-inch return on the coping material. Which doesn't match what you have on the street facade. And again, it's called stone, which I think is great, but it's not what it said, so I want to make sure that we know what that is. We know what we're approving, if we're approving, when we're ready to approve them.
Well, I think it's probably, I would suggest that probably is a good idea to show the materials in a separate board, so we can have a more clearance view of what the materials are we using. That's probably what we're missing here.
I think so, and I want to be really clear, because you have a lot of different components here, which is great, right? I think, but we have, we'll call it the coping material, we have the coining material, it's QUOIN, that's the corner brick, just for anybody. The lintel material, right? We have the balcony fascias. We have the balcony railings. And the window sills, which I think we've also talked about as being a brick sill. So
Yeah.
These things have been discussed and said, they're not clearly articulated here. I don't want to wind up where we're approving a drawing and we go and it does not match what we thought we had approved. We want it to be really clear. And these are material differences that would, affect how this building would read from the street. Are there other materials, guys? Sorry, I think I got a good list there. I just want to be super clear about what we're asking for.
Okay, I think, I agree. We should go that a separate board showing all the materials, and if there's something else that you guys wants to discuss about this project,
Yeah, I'm wondering if updated renderings would be helpful. I think these material lists would be a good way in case the rendering is, if there's any discrepancies, the material list would be the governing. That might be that might be clear. And again, I just go back to making sure that the relationship to the coping in those corners is correct, because that doesn't look right to me.
Okay,
But it's other, you have like a little exposed ledge up at the top that doesn't, I don't think you'd actually build it that way.
okay, we'll try to clear that up.
Right? Sorry, I realize I talked a lot there. There are other kind of questions I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to sort of go back in my memory banks and maybe Holly, your notes, because I don't have my notes, but, and maybe I'm the only one troubled by this. I'm still having a little bit of problem with the distance between the second story and the roof line. And I don't know whether it's the height or the lack of detail or something that it just troubles me a little bit. I don't know where we ended up with it last time we talked about it.
So last time there was a detail, which was removed this time. And then I think we were talking about widening that top, so if you've done that.
Okay.
I don't know if that
Maybe,
changed.
so maybe I'm reversing my,
But there was like a rectangle. In one of them, they weren't on both though, because one of our. Feedback was to match the rendering of the plan,
right,
and then the other feedback was coordinate the plans with the materials.
right.
And actually, just jumping back to the rendering, if you've got materials of those, you just kind of, the window and garage door color, like, again, a call out for that color, because it actually looks quite nice here, but that doesn't read in the other drawings. And yeah, again, just go back to the rendering, just to be for clarity. On the rendering, it shows the brick going back down to some sort of maybe ledge, but the brick, there's no termination of the base, and the line drawing, it looks like you do have that, some sort of a detail that follows the line of the balcony. So just, which is, I'm not complaining about it, but I just want to make sure that that's what your intent is and what the material is down there.
I see what you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a motion to reopen the public hearing?
Eric's happy to make a motion to reopen the public hearing.
And Jonathan can second.
Right, any objections? None, is there anybody here to speak to this application in the room? And don't see anybody. If there's anybody on Zoom, you can use the hand raise function. And I don't see anybody there. All right, can I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
I think there's the motion to adjourn public hearing.
Michael Aronson, second.
All right, any objections to that? There are none. I think you guys, do you have any questions about the feedback we provided? I tried to be very, very clear about what we need. I think the most important thing is the material. The material call outs, the photographs of those different materials on the line drawing. An updated rendering would be nice, but I think that like I said, the line drawing with the materials would be the most important that we would need in order to approve this. And I think
Okay, I understand. I think,
sorry, back to the record of this meeting if you need to relist that.
it's okay. I
Understood.
Thank you,
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn that agenda item.
Michael Aronson, motion to adjourn the agenda item.
Probably would accept the motion.
All right, any objections? None. Okay, thank you guys. Okay, so we are gonna move on. Next up, we have Planning Board 04/2025 from EAR 13/2025, and this is for 209-211 Main Street. So the applicant's returning. This is a site plan, conditional use, payment in lieu, BAR, a new mixed-use building on Main Street. So we welcome the applicant back.
Chairman Roy, how are you?
I'm very good.
Board and staff. Okay, good evening. Even I remember the comments you made the last time. I did. Anyway, but for yours. Good evening, again, Bob Stanziel, architect for the project. Juan Sears, represents CAC Owners Group. Since our last meeting, we had resubmitted plans addressing some of the zoning concerns. Mostly some of the smaller issues, well, the height issue we resolved. There was a question about the height of the building. Took care of that. Some other items about mentioning parking spaces and backup spaces in the garage. We resolved those issues as well. We also, it was mentioned, I think Joe had mentioned about concern about the proximity of the proposed building on the north side. With respect to the windows on the existing building. So we pulled a wall back 6 feet off the property line to accommodate for light and air by code as necessary for the joint building, so we did that. We also revised, as suggested by Valerie, because we had a lot of space in our, in fact, we had a lot of livable area. So now we revised the apartments to 7 1-bedrooms and 9 2-bedroom apartments, still 16 units. So that's count now. We eliminated all the studios. But the only issue that did come up, which is, I guess, a major one, is Joe had decided that we need a variance now for the commercial space. I mean, the residential use being on the ground floor of the building, just not permitted to the DC district. So that potentially is a use variance.
Well,
We discussed that would be an area variance from zoning board of appeals.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because I did also look into the overlay district, as you mentioned, to Valerie, so that sort of redesigns the whole building and setbacks and things of that nature. So that's great. So with that, I guess we can move forward.
Yeah, I mean, let's get the updated drawings up. I think it would be helpful to hear, from both Valerie and Tony, just on kind of preliminary comments right now. As we kind of, I mean, maybe that would be my preferred starting point here.
Sure, I'm gonna just kind of highlight a couple of things similar to the prior application that just presented, the 34 State Street. We really do need to finalize that EAF part 1 so we can get started on referrals and stuff. And I think it's important that this month we finalize exactly what it is variances that you're gonna need to seek. Just so that we can get that also finalized as well as part of the records, that we can actually begin that process.
Joe, excuse me, will Joe have to give you a denial letter to go to the zoning board of assembly, is it?
Yes, right, but we just want to make sure that, what it is that you're submitting, that's the final plan, we'll be able to review it for like any other variances that are necessary. And then, because what we noticed, there's a little bit of discrepancy in the plans, like some of it refers to the overlay, some of it refers to the VC, and so we just want to make sure that you're definitely moving forward with the VC. Okay. And then the only other thing right now, I mean, because there's a lot of other approvals that are necessary. But I think in terms of the overall site plan, I think we raised some outstanding information that's needed for the site plan in terms of submission. And then we are raising the parking and the parking access and parking area. I think that needs to be, I'd recommend the board taking a look at that a little bit more. And before the applicant continues moving forward.
And that's specifically related to the access through the village lot.
Well, not only the access, but also just in terms of dimensions. I mean, I think Tony had comments on the parking lot, and I can just kind of pass it on to him.
That's a good.
The applicant didn't at this time around really address any of the engineering comments. So I understand a lot of these, early plans, you don't want to get too far into the process, but you did widen it to 24, the back about the required 9 by 18 spaces. I think there's still a concern with these stacker spaces.
Right.
Personally, I've never seen this in a private residency like this. I see this type of stuff in parking garages and stuff. And there's always the, the threat of somebody using it wrong. They have to put I know they have to drive up a ramp to get onto the actual stacker elevator. So there's like room for, some potential bad accidents, trying to run those things. So I just wanted to get an understanding on that whole aspect of it.
Yeah, well, I know that, it's pretty much, as that diagram shows, it's open underneath. It's really just the wood lift that the upper car goes on. And again, we do have the 9 2-bedroom apartments. Those will be assigned to the 2-bedroom apartments, the 2 stackers for their 2 dedicated spaces. So it won't be anybody but that unit using those two spaces. So
I'm also,
like to be like, for me, I don't know how to use one of those things. How are you stopping, like, people now have to run these things, like a household, somebody has to know how to, bring a car up, put the one below, in the morning, oh shoot, I need my car, this one out, that one down, this one out, this one, So
or is the car, like, what's the weight limit on it? And are there any cars, especially electric cars, which are super heavy, where, may not even, accommodate, the lift may not accommodate them. Forget about the fact that you know, it's unless, you know, there's no valet, right, who's operating these things, these are homeowners,
Yes.
that would
Yeah.
scare the.
Yeah, I mean, they're all different designs for different weight limits, things of that nature. I know that they use them quite a bit in Urshel and all the apartments, large apartments. Some are used by valet, but a lot of them are self-serve in their buildings. They used to have triple stackers on the original buildings, which they eliminated because there were too many problems with LA limited to two story. But I can get more information, and work with traffic engineer that may be able to give us more details. on this. We can actually do, you know, a sort of a flow chart, how it would back out, pull in and things of that nature.
Yeah,
And how it actually operates, how a person would actually operate. I can get more detail.
yeah, and also heights too. I'd love to see the heights.
Yeah,
Because, you know, you get
we've
fans, some
got-
families have two vans, two, you know, minivans. You know, I don't know how that's gonna have to go, so.
Yeah, I don't think the other plans have the section on there, but we've got, since we kept lowering this floor to get lower to the parking lot, we've got about 18 feet of clearance in this garage. We've got plenty of height. But yes, we'll get more detailed information on that service.
So there's not height to have two, or no, you don't have the access to do two levels of parking?
We looked at that, unfortunately not, because a ramp takes up too much space. You know, it's not enough width there really.
Yeah,
for a
you can't
ramp.
get up in the amount of
Yeah, traffic, yeah.
longitudinal,
Yeah.
There's no other, there's no other way to access that upper level from another part of the site. I mean, I know it's a locked-in site.
Yeah, you know, originally we started, we looked at coming in from Main Street, but it's a state road. They're not
Yeah,
gonna give us that
okay.
curve, so it's not gonna happen. They looked at that initially, so, yeah.
And this array still contemplates 7 payment of lieu parking spaces, right?
I'm sorry, man.
So this array that you have here with the 9,
Yeah, we still need.
stackers,
spaces.
you still need 7 spaces.
Correct,
So
yes.
if for whatever reason the stacker wasn't deemed feasible, you're already in for 7, it would just be 16.
16.
Yeah.
correct.
yeah,
Yes.
because you 9 back on, yeah, if you get rid of that. Yeah.
Correct.
Right, and there's I think I also have a question just in terms of the definition of a parking spot in the village code, and it's the stacker qualify, is that a, you know, it might be like, a convenience extra spot to alleviate the, you know, the parking burden in the building, but is that actually a spot? And I don't know if that's a question that's been answered.
An elevated space.
Yeah,
There's new ground.
I just, like I said, I think about, you know, telling my wife, oh, you have to get the car. But no,
You take the other one.
Mark, well, I won't.
Instead of just pulling the car out, it's like, can you lower the car?
Is the parking minimum the same everywhere in Wasserman, Village Wasserman? It's the same for all.
So now, yeah, the board just revised the parking. I think it's like 1.5, or one
Well-
space for each one bedroom, and then,
Oh, I thought it's not 1.5, or is that?
no. they
But it's
originally
uniform
said-
across all
yeah.
zoning.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember my habit though. It was 1.5.
Give me a second and I'll pull it up for you.
No worries. I thought it
Do
might.
you want me to go to it here, Alice?
Oh, I guess you could.
Remember that whole neat trick I could do?
Yeah,
one bedroom.
forgot about that. Yes, I think it's,
I know, I understand there's a perception that there's not enough parking in downtown. Yeah, maybe.
all right, so it's one space per unit for an efficiency of studio. 1.5 spaces, you're Tony, for one bedroom, and 2 spaces per unit for 2 or more bedrooms.
Yeah, that's right. And you have to round up, where it's like decimal point.
Yeah, the O's go up, even if it's 0.1, it's
Should be traumatic.
She's too quick, man.
Thank you.
Okay, so,
Okay, so we.
Go
Go
ahead.
more information on that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. no, and I think just procedural, I just want to kind of round off where we are with the conversations. I think it's helpful to see the updates and the progress that's been made since the last time we met. I think, you know, Valerie pointed out that, you know, we need some, you know, finalized EAF before we can move on any secra, you know, determinations, including just the declaration. And then, I think, you know, the parking conversation, that's gonna be a big kind of question, and understanding that, and, I mean, you know, from safety to definitions to, you know, I have lots of questions about it. I think those have been all articulated, so like kind of understanding that better. obviously, and then, the feedback and in the memos that some of it hasn't been discussed here, but I think that we're there. I think are there other access parking, that we talked, other than what your comment, Tony's comments were, just getting into that lot, right? That was a whole other portion of this, which is access off of the building public lot. I just want to make sure we're, we can just put the site plan up here, just because I think putting that back in the forefront here. This has been before the BOT?
Yes. But the board gave basically a green light for them to come to this board.
Right.
Ultimately, it's got to go back to them, after you finish reviewing the site plan.
And I know,
I don't know if the site's in there, Maggie.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
gonna,
The old site plan.
Last plan, the ones prior to that, huh?
Basically, the lower level is basically the site plan.
Yeah, right there.
Most parts.
It's about.
When there's JMC's plans.
Yeah.
So the community center is here,
right.
Broadway.
So this is that lot, right, it's like the overflow, like when the rec parking lot's too busy, that's like where I
Yeah,
go park.
exactly, yeah.
Where you shred your paper, exactly right.
I didn't know that.
Got it. And so, and I guess, just in terms of how that existing parking lot is striped and how this entrance relates to that, which is kind of a little off center, and just kind of like turning in when that parking lot is full, what that looks like, in diagramming that. I don't know if that curb cut is fixed or if there's a way to align it a little bit better with the drive aisles in the existing parking lot. I think that relationship seems a little bit, awkward. And so I think, like, I get it, and I don't think that you can really do anything on this site without going through that lot to get there. So, like, me personally, I think that it's probably necessary to make this site usable. So I don't have a problem with it in concept, but I'm not sure it's been worked out or designed yet. I don't know, other thoughts.
I'm sure, part of JMC's team is gonna be traffic engineers, so I'm sure we'll provide some feedback on that, so.
Right, but that, obviously how you get in is gonna impact what you do on the inside, so if you have to move an entrance, right, you could lose spots. So that, I don't think that that's super resolved right now. I think it's the entrance is based on what you have on the inside, and it's not really relating to parking, right?
Unfortunately, that opening has to be there. On our garage, the garage door open, referring to, so on the back of our building, in order to get those spaces in.
Right, but I think that there's gonna have to be some give and take on that.
Yes. While we're here.
Yep.
So again, just procedurally, Valerie, I'll have to correct that EAF and get it to you. So then I have to get from Joe, an actual denial to get to the zoning board.
Well, this is also, the type 2, so we're gonna be,
You mean,
listed.
listed, yeah.
So there would be a referral to the zoning board from this
Yeah.
board, assuming we declare lead agency, so that would be the procedure. But we, after we declare, and once we're at a point where we feel like we're, satisfied enough with where the design is, that it would make sense to go to the board, to the zoning board, that's how that would work. Gotcha. Okay, so are there any other, I guess, between Tony, Valerie, we touched on your comments. Any other board questions? Can we reopen the public hearing?
Mike Clarence, a motion to reopen the public hearing.
Hallelujah, second motion.
Right, any objections? No objections, we're in a public hearing. Is there anybody in the room to speak to this application? Don't see anybody in the room. If there's anybody on Zoom who would like to speak to this application, you can use the hand raise function. And I don't see any. And again, as I said before, it would be great to have some public comment. This is, I think, a really important, and we haven't really discussed that. This is a really important project right in the middle of the village.
Great.
So I'd love, I know that I'm not speaking, if anybody who's reading this transcript, your spare time, I would love to, kind of get more public comment on a project like this. But seeing nobody right now, can I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
Eric, time to make a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Hallelujah, second motion.
Great, any objections? The public hearing is adjourned. Applicant, do you have any other questions or?
No, I just want to mention, we also got some great information from the town historian. Some
Oh.
old photographs that were,
Oh, right.
we can't really replicate what was there, but
Sure.
we've got some good, I think we incorporated some nice details on the buildings.
Yeah, well, I think we
We'll
can.
bring the photographs and all that the next time around.
Yeah, that'd be nice to have that conversation.
So put them on the plan and point out what we already from the older.
And this is also, I think, just also as a reminder to board members, this will be reviewed by HPC, and I do think it would be helpful when because we're having the BAR conversation is, and I think I've talked about that with staff, is maybe having a joint meeting with the HPC so that we're not giving you don't go to them and they give you one, set of comments, and then it comes to us and it's a totally different set of
Right.
comments. Be nice to, both from your end, I think also just from the from both of our boards to have some cooperation in that review. process.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay,
All right, thank you very much.
thank you. Can I have a motion from the board to adjourn the agenda item?
There's a motion to adjourn the item.
John Vivian, a second.
Any objections? There are none. All right, so we're adjourned. Okay, thank you very much. Look forward to the next iteration. Yep. Right. Next up, we have 345 North Highland, and this is site plan and BAR approvals for the conversion of a former nursery into an adult use dispensary. And we saw that in last meeting. So we'll see the revisions. Maybe we can bring the site plan up, probably the place to start. And then I'll let the applicant introduce themselves and kind of just discuss, kind of go over what's been changed in response to our meeting last month.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephen Bassini, SJB Architecture. Here representing the applicant for 345 North Highland, who is present tonight as well. We did, as you mentioned, Ken, last month to open this public hearing for the project. There were a list of comments that were received prior to last month's meeting that I addressed verbally at the meeting, but then of course updated the documents and submitted additional documents to address them. Subsequent to that meeting, there were some emails exchanged between myself, the village, and the consultants, just to clarify some of the points that needed to be made on the drawings and documents that needed to be submitted. Those were addressed as well. What was submitted for this most recent one, I know you've all received the copies of them, but I'll just go through it. There was a comment letter from me that addressed where on the drawings specifically the changes were made, specifically highlighted, bubbled, and notated. Also, an operations summary for the dispensary was submitted. A grand opening plan was submitted. The engineering report was submitted to assess the buildings and structures in the back of the property. A security outline and camera location and specification document was submitted. Lighting cut sheets for the shielded wall packs. A site planting specifications and renderings. And then, of course, my revised architectural drawings, which I believe are up there now. So I had a list of these comments. There were 13 that I addressed in my memo. Again, I know you've received them, so I don't know that I need to go through them all right now. If you have questions, I'd be willing to answer them. I kind of wanted to more formally address the new ones that came up recently. Is that all right? So Kellard had issued a revised, updated memo of August 21st. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. It seemed to me that they were satisfied, or at least they said that they had addressed the comments that you had requested, and were on the drawings. There's a little summary here in the back that basically says what I just said in longer words, but I don't know that there's any additional comments on that memo. On the Nelson Pope Voorhees comments memo, and I don't want to misinterpret it, but I'm assuming that if there were bolded comments next to the original comments, and there was ones left on there that were not bolded, that those are still open items. If I misunderstood that, then I apologize, but I just wanted to go through some of the items that seems that were still open on that memo. On item 2B, there was a bulk regulation comment that said that regarding the zoning, that all property, the entire site should be incorporated into the zoning table. I just wanted to be clear that all coverages and everything and setbacks for the entire site are on that zoning table. They are included. It includes all pervious and everything else. Item 5, as far as the exterior of the building, there were several comments made about what is changing in the building to make it clear. On the drawing itself, The consultant gave a verbiage specifically. It is posted on the drawing, but just to be clear again, the only changes to the exterior of the building are that one window in the back is going to be covered over. And then there's going to be that tinting on the windows, which is expressed in that comment, which is a requirement of the state for dispensaries. The lighting is being replaced, and there's a couple of the spots over there. Those cuts are submitted, but there are no other changes to the exterior of the building. In item, the planting plan. So there was I don't know if you wanted to bring that up. Thank you. I appreciate it. So I know it's not necessarily a requirement. I know there's not a buffer requirement here or a planning plan requirement. The board did request it. It was a great request. I think specifically, Mrs. Aronson board member Aronson had requested renderings of the proposal. So there were no plans, actual landscape plans in a two-dimensional line drawing submitted. Felt that this was more appropriate and what was requested. If the board does require something more, I would request respectively that be part of the approval, a part of the resolution as a request. But right here, there are 3 locations specifically. This is a little well in the back of the property over there on the south side that will be, as you can see, greatly improved. It is contained within a stone retaining wall. It would not really require any erosion controls or anything because it's all within that bed. It's elevated, but of course, I make a general comment about these plants that were proposed, boxwood, lavender, and marigold. They were specifically requested for deer deterrence factors. There's a pungent smell and a bitter taste that deters deer. I know that deer will eat anything when there's a harsh winter, but it's been done appropriately, I believe, to try and maximize the deterrence. That is the one location on the back of the building. On the east side, I'm sorry, sorry, you can put that, thank you. At the front of the building right there, that was done in a planting bed at grade level. There was no proposal to put anything in front of it, again, to prevent the deer or erosion. I don't know that achieves the effect of beautifying the front of the building. I do agree that there may be some deer going up to that again, but it will just have to be maintained. And again, those are deer deterrent plantings. On the back, there is an existing planting bed there now that is unkept. That is the proposal. Again, there's no erosion issues there because it all is contained within the stone walls. It's elevated, but most important thing I want to say about the deer and anything with these plantings, this will now be, as the proposal states, a fully enclosed site. There is now a wrought iron 6-foot fence across the whole front with 2 gates on the parking and on the walkway on the right side. Along the back, we'll have a 6-foot high chain link fence with privacy slats. The only location really or access to deer or anything wildlife will have to get in there will be through the gate when it is opened, unless they jump over. So I believe it will be a pretty well contained site for that matter. I also want to point out before I skip off of that point for the planting, that the owner of the property took it upon himself after the neighbors came that time last month and said that there was a spot in the back over there where someone at some point had taken down some shrubs, some plants or something, buffering the property from them. And I know that we're putting up a fence, but the owner took it upon himself in an agreement with the neighbor to put up some evergreens. And unfortunately, I don't have anything submitted here, but I just wanted to be able to maybe pass this along. Is that all right? Sorry?
Yes, yeah, you can pass it around.
These are on the front of the property. At the same time, you took an opportunity to beautify the front of the property on the side of the fence. And also where that circular, semicircle well was over there, he also put some plantings along that side. Those
are photographs that these are already planted.
There's the bear, yes. And he obviously has the right to landscape his property. And he, again, heard the client's comments. I guess maybe he felt at some point, maybe he took those down or something took them down. So he went ahead and put those up specifically on the neighbor's property.
Can you just indicate where
Sure.
or lead matters
Stuff
stuff
up,
that
I don't mind.
Some of the stuff will probably.
Right up here, right above here. Right in that buffer area right there.
Okay, so is that actually on the neighbor side of the lot?
Yeah, because the fence we're putting up is on our property. It wouldn't
Exterior to the fence, so this was done on.
Yeah, in an agreement with the neighbor. Now, there's the other plantings that you see are on the owner's property as well. There are plantings, evergreen trees put these, as you saw. These are actually on the inside here, on the parking, sorry. On the inside of this fence over here, and then also as you go down, scroll down a little bit, there's plantings along the street where that semicircle well is that we're planting in, all along the fence there as well. So this fence is 6 foot high. These are about a foot over it, so they're about 7 foot evergreens. He took the opportunity to beautify the site, and I think actually hopefully answered some of the neighbors' concerns about that. But that has nothing to do with the landscape plan that we're doing, proposing.
Well, I think it will, so I think
Sure,
it
yeah.
would probably be good to have an updated site plan with what was installed on that site plan as part of any condition of approval.
Okay, as far as the condition of, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yep.
And the other
Yeah.
question.
Saying that the fence is actually. gonna
The fence
go
will be on the
here.
inside of that.
Yeah, so
correct.
that would
Yep.
be good. The fence would be here, so it'd be. good.
So they'll be able to enjoy
Right.
those trees as they grow and see them as opposed to seeing the fence and the trees peeking out over the top. So that was the
And this is a black epoxy chain link with slats, right?
correct, yes.
And I think we looked at the slats.
Yeah, I have literally a photograph, I believe, of on that plan over to the left-hand side. I show the slats, I believe, on that drawing.
I just have a question. Who's gonna be responsible for the maintenance of the plants that are on the neighbor's
Yeah, that's-
property? Are they taking on the responsibility?
The agreement was made between them. I don't know, but he did it. I mean, ultimately, that's not really the purview you or me necessarily to say what he planted on their property. They may have hired him. I don't know, but he planted the plants. I just wanted to express that he felt that maybe somewhere along the line there was an issue, so he took care of it.
I mean, this board can't, we're reviewing a site plan within the confines of this
Correct.
lot line, so
Right.
we can't
Yeah.
show anything outside.
Right, but anything that was inside, because he
Right.
said that there were some that was planted
Right.
inside the.
Those are absolutely the responsibility of the owner and the applicant,
Right.
whoever the certain terminations. But yeah, outside, I don't know whose purview that really is, except for the neighbor and the owner.
So I think just noting that noting the landscaping improvements that have been made on the applicant's lot on the site plan would be important.
I will make those changes.
Can you submit those photos to the planning department just for the record?
Yes, I
Yeah, they were circulated this
Thank you.
evening. We want the
Just
public
got them.
to-
And then the maintenance of the landscaping that is around the building is.
responsibility of the applicant.
Of the applicant.
Whatever their agreement, his agreement is with the owner, yeah, it'll be.
Right, and I would recommend that that also be added to the plan, so
Yeah.
it's clear as to what's being.
Is that not, sure, is that not normally expected that the owner or applicant, I mean, the tenant maintains the property?
I mean, the
So
only,
we'll put it on the plan, but is that,
Right, this is for site plan.
Right, okay, that they would be maintained, yeah, that those, that those gardens, that the beautification should be maintained, I think as opposed to, if it were to become overgrown or, unattractive, that it would be something that would be enforceable by way of the site plan.
and the only comment I just want to make about the landscaping is like marigolds are seasonal.
Yeah.
At this time of year, they're not, I mean, they're not a year-round plant. So I'm curious. That's sort of why I asked the maintenance question, because I think like they're selling, marigolds now at the grocery store, and they sort of this time of year, you put them in the ground, but I don't think they're like year-round plants. I mean, I'm not a great gardener,
Yeah,
but.
they're annuals.
Right.
They're,
So,
Fine.
I mean, I'm just sort of curious that there may be dead spaces in that landscaping plan and that's why I sort of
That'd
asked
be
the question,
rejuvenated,
who's
yeah.
maintaining it? Will they put something else there
Well, you can put like black-eyed Susans or coneflowers, which
Right.
are also deer resistant, and those
Yeah.
are perennial.
Yeah, they're visually attractive.
they just a comment, I was just.
Nice. So I will put a comment that they'll be maintained by the property owner and obviously whatever annuals will have to be replanted, yes.
um,
Well, or you could just put the,
Or switch to perennials.
yeah,
Yes, which is easier for everybody.
that nature of black seasons. Okay,
Oh, sorry.
no, you go ahead. I think you addressed Valerie's comments. I just want to make sure, Valerie, is there anything else open on your review that you wanted to make sure we were touching on?
no, it was really mostly the landscaping plan at this point.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, well, yeah, and then also I think that I was gonna go through like
Okay,
all for the
okay.
conditions.
That's,
We
yeah, I
have
think
to-
that would probably be a good next step.
Yeah.
You can go through them. I think, the site, a lot of things that we talked about last time during our meeting were related to the back half of the lot, which is
Yeah.
not part of the project, and it's fenced off. And I know we had asked for some comments on the site plan, some signage on the lot to ensure that that back half is not occupied, there's no approved use for it. And I know there were notes, I think very explicitly added, there's, to the drawings, kind of describing the land, the structures, the need for regular maintenance, inspection and safety of those structures. And I think the notes also allude to the fact that any other use that might be proposed there in the future would require
Right,
review and approval by whoever it needs to be reviewed and approved by.
right, and so, but before, one of the conditions will be though, before the CO can be issued, that back lot needs to be in accordance with what's on the site plan. So there are cars and stuff like that, right? So they would have to be removed.
Agreed. Are there other conditions? This might be a good time just to.
Yeah, so I was gonna also have as part of the conditions refer to, the hours of operation, which I think were discussed at the last meeting, and nobody had a concern with, which was like 9 to 9, Monday through Thursday, 9 to 10, Friday and Saturday, and 10 to 6 on Sunday. That the grand opening plan will be reviewed and in effect for when it opens. And then other than that, I think everything else was taken care of as part of the site plan revisions.
Okay. And the grand opening plan, I mean, is that your office, Valerie, who would be reviewing that, Tony?
I think we will have, I mean, we'll probably have the building department and the police department.
Building, please, okay.
Yeah.
So may I ask, did you say that the review of that as a conditional permit or receiving that as a conditional?
Well, you already
Yeah, I just wanna make
sent
sure.
it
Yeah,
in,
no,
but
we're
then
not-
we're gonna need to review, right, the village is gonna need to review it.
Okay. Tony, you're right, I think your letter was closed, so. Okay, can I have a motion to reopen the public hearing?
Michael Aronson, motion to reopen the public hearing.
Kind of, a second motion.
All right, is there anybody here? I don't, doesn't look like it, to speak to the application. Is there anybody on Zoom who is here to speak to this application? You can use the hand raise function. I don't see anybody raising their hand. So I think kind of before we move forward, just, I think we've discussed a handful of conditions. I know the conversation that we had last meeting, it looks like those comments were addressed, I think very straightforwardly, to the degree where they were less straightforwardly addressed. They're, I think, in the category of conditions, it sounds like, from what we've discussed. Any kind of questions, comments, or thoughts from the board?
I had one quick question, and I know you spent a lot of time talking about your security plan, but I just want to clarify, there is no on-site security, like a person who's a security guard.
We are not required to have on-site, but depending on traffic and depending on how busy we are, we will have it if necessary.
Okay.
Yes. So it's, yeah, New York State doesn't require, but we feel it's probably important if we start to get very busy. We want to have that for the busy times.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, is there just kind of like polling the group before we, because, decide to close the public hearing? Does anyone have any kind of questions or concerns that remain open from the review that we've done to date? Now would be the time to bring that up. I have a motion. If we don't, then I think a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second motion.
All right, any objections to that? All right, none. So I think that kind of, that puts us to the end of this review. I think that we looked at this and, just kind of, taking a quick step back. That really, this is a site plan and BAR approval. Ultimately, that's really, those are the only two items that we're approving. It's an as of right use, just as a reminder for everybody. So I know that Valerie listed out a handful of conditions. Maybe can you just restate those for the record now before we
Sure.
move forward to the motion?
So the conditions will be submitting a landscaping plan that includes what was planted and what is being proposed to be planted. Also that one of the conditions of a CO is the removal of the cars so that the condition, the and I'll work out the language, but basically the site plan, the existing conditions on site reflect the site plan before the CO is issued. And that the conditions, general conditions will be the hours of operation, the delivery that was like to identify the delivery schedule, and then also, the grand opening plan would be, reviewed by the village.
All right. Okay, with that, I have a motion from the board to approve the application.
Eric Talbot, I'll make motion to approve the application.
Michael Aronson, second.
And a roll call.
Okay, Michael Aronson, aye. Eric Talbot,
Aye.
Pam Nelson.
Aye.
Holly Thurston,
Aye.
Angela Grissom Guinness.
Aye.
Carla Elliott,
Aye.
and Chair Roy.
All right, motion is approved. And, so you guys, I think we'll work with village staff just in terms of getting resolutions approved and permitting and all of that. Okay, awesome.
Appreciate you. Thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're now gonna go back to the top of the agenda. So
What that sound
keep going. There's a long meeting. Look punch drunk, I apologize. Serious. All right, so there's I guess a draft local law, for a moratorium on, cannabis dispensaries.
Right, it's gonna be specifically, so, it will be specifically for cannabis dispensaries, vape shops, smoke shops, vape lounges, and vape consumption businesses. Mostly because originally when the village board of trustees, initially, we had a number of conversations with them as to how they wanted to regulate this when there was the opt-in, opt-out program. And at that point in time, there was a lot more restrictions on where the locations of particular cannabis dispensaries could occur. And at that point in time, the village board felt like, well, let's just see what ends up coming in, because there was an extensive area within the village that was open to that. But since that time, the state has revised their regulations and opening up more possibilities to properties that could potentially have cannabis dispensaries. You've now approved your third one, and we have at least 2 others in the pipeline, and we've had other calls. So at this point, the village board feels that they want to just kind of put like a little bit of a cool down period on this. Taryn's going to be, or actually Linda Whitehead will be attending the upcoming village board work session to talk about what are the options that the village could look at. Do they want to create like their own, its own use? Do they want to restrict it in particular zoning districts? So these are a lot of things that are just beginning that conversation, but this is really just to kind of put a moratorium on it, because it just seems at this point, it's pretty excessive on how many are coming in, and I don't know whether really, really not that much.
It's important enough the moratorium applies to new land use applications. So
Right.
so what you just approved tonight can continue moving forward with
Right.
their process.
Right.
It just puts the brakes on anything new.
What about the 2 that are in the pipeline that you mentioned? Are they already, they won't be able?
They're gonna be, well. I think
We're
Mike-
working it out.
Yeah.
We're working it out.
Yeah.
They've been asked to present to the Board of Trustees, because the Board of Trustees has 60 days from the initial application to make their voice heard to OCM. And so to reserve the right of the Board of Trustees to do that, we've asked them to present, while this sort of unfolds.
But if this is adopted, they won't be able to formally file an application.
I mean, this is like this was a thought that I've had as I've seen all, and I was, until recently unaware of the other applications in the pipeline. It happened very, very quickly and very, very suddenly, and I think it's a really good opportunity for the BOT to take a look at it and make sure. And also, I think just from public feedback that we're getting in these meetings, I'm sure the BOT is getting in theirs as well. So
Right, and I think it'll be more obvious once they all start actually coming, online, which will be, shortly. And I think the other concern is that, we've talked to some of these these business owners, and I don't necessarily know if they're even looking at the oversaturation of
very excited, right?
Right, so anyhow, so that's really so the Board of Trustees would like a, recommendation from this board on your thoughts on.
Seems, I think it makes a lot of sense to take a step back. really look at it a little bit more in depth in terms of the impact on neighborhoods, communities, uses, existing uses.
I also saw something recently where there had been some approvals for spaces that weren't actually in the right location, and now they're.
They read the state law wrong.
Yeah.
And they issued like 150 approvals to locations that were otherwise not eligible under state law, so now they're trying to figure that out.
And by they, you mean.
Yeah.
State.
Like-
Not they.
So OCM was sued by about 150 applicants recently, and then I think the state is proposing legislation to legalize those particular locations who got caught
Or
up.
like they also have like a hardship thing that they can apply for to like move or something,
I
but
have
like, yeah. So maybe a cool down is like, yeah.
Well, and so originally the restrictions were like, they originally had restrictions from like community centers, but now it's only places of youth unless like.
Public youth centers that are exclusively catered towards the youth, which
So-
identify that anything.
Any community center, you know, and then,
Mixed use buildings aren't covered.
right, and then there was like, and then there's also like, you know, the measurements originally, everyone thought it was from like a radius from like the property line boundaries, but now it's 200 feet from like the actual entrance of the building on the same side of the roadway. So like it really just decreases like your overall boundary.
And, go ahead.
No, so I was just wondering, as like an analog, how does that compare to zoning laws around liquor stores?
The cannabis regulations are supposed to be modeled after the liquor store regulations. How that's going for OCM, I'm not entirely sure.
Just curious.
But they're modeled after the alcohol
I
beverage
know that
law.
people have like a real. Always, but it's like liquor stores have always been around, continue to be around, and you know, everybody knows that side of retail. What that does, it can be fun for people, but it's also, you know, and arguably it's detrimental.
And then there's also, and I think, you know, to the Valerie comment before, kind of about, I don't know if they know all the other ones in the pipeline, right? There's, the market's gonna work itself out at some point, right? If the village can't sustain X number of stores, and same with liquor stores, same with delis, same with gas stations, same with
Right.
pizzerias, right? It's, you can only have so many, and then, you're just not gonna survive.
I think the moratorium makes sense because it gives us all, you know, the public, the village, everybody sort of a chance to understand and kind of learn from it, you know, rolling this out, what is it, you know, how popular it is.
Yeah.
The public outcry.
Yeah, I think the moratorium makes sense. I do think, I was gonna say is that, if people were trying to open up a lot of restaurants, we wouldn't have an issue with that as much as that. That's something that's more attractive, you know, but this is a little more, I think, a little more controversial.
Well, and I think the biggest concern, at least from my perspective, Maddie, you sit with the board all the time, is that, you know, they felt like it's a moving target. So what they thought were their parameters that they were responding to at the beginning seems to be constantly shifting. And there was even just something recently that just came in with the distances between one marijuana and one cannabis dispensary to another. They changed that, you know, so it's all these things that keep,
Everything keeps changing.
yeah.
Yeah.
The regulations that the village looked at when they were deciding whether to opt in or opt out are entirely different than what we have now. So
Do we know why that is?
The state's
Yeah.
gonna continue to make changes as they see
yeah,
it, as they think.
And I'm assuming that there is leeway in the state law in terms of defining separate uses. Is that something that the village, or is that a question that needs to be looked into? That's a question.
it's the state law sets out certain categories of controls that a municipality can adopt. So.
But it's limiting,
But it's-
right?
but it's
Because
limiting
remember
what
you
you
were
can
asking
do.
about the hours of operations,
Yeah.
you know, and they have it, like, you can't restrict it below a certain amount of hours per week, you know, which
We
is,
can't even formally restrict them because you have to have a law in your books that allows you to set hours of operations for dispensaries. So you can recommend changes to their hours of operations, but you can't actually enforce that unless you have a law in your books, which we've done, so.
Right. Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because I think that there's, you know, there's a side of it that we're just seeing this for the first time and it's new and it's, you know, because it's new, it's we're uncertain about it, but that doesn't in and of itself make it a problem or a bad thing. But I think that what you guys are pointing out related to the changes in the state law, because it's at the state level as well, I think is maybe something bigger to understand, make sure that the village's laws are responsive and taking into account what's changing at the state level in terms of how it impacts Austining. So, any other thoughts or comments?
Do we have to make a formal?
No, I mean, I took, I took notes. I mean, we'll be attending the September 10th village board meeting, and usually I'll let them pass on your recommendations. Usually when you agree, I usually let them know that, I usually send something a little bit more formal when you have specific recommendations to changes.
Great, okay.
All right.
All right, guys. Actually, just really quickly, I know, yes, just adjourned items. Just if we can kind of walk through that's open, anything that we may be ready to remove from the agenda.
So 5 Sherman is actually be coming back with some revisions next month for at least, there are gonna be revisions enough for the board to kind of get have a reaction to the changes to the architecture, and then they'll be coming back again for more refinement, but so they'll be back.
Just real
yeah.
quick, Valerie, the building right next to 5 Sherman, which has sat idle for the past half a year at least, do we know what's happening with that?
So Jamie received a phone call from the potential new property owners. And it looks like they might want to make changes to the exterior of the building. That's all we know at this point.
So that would come back.
That would also come back too.
This is the one that's half built.
Yeah,
Immediately
yeah,
next to
That
it.
post sitting in the yard and the.
Yeah.
All that siding. Okay, thank you.
Then 80 Main Street, anybody want to take that?
Still under review.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Get there, right?
We're edging ever closer.
Yeah. The speed bumps are getting smaller, maybe?
Maybe in a similar, I don't know, 171, working on it.
Yeah, we're still
So
waiting.
did you have a call with their engineer recently?
Yes,
So
Okay.
things are
There have
moving.
been conversations.
and laid it out as clear as we can,
Okay. Conversation.
very detailed.
And One Bank Portland.
We have, I think we are sending out or have,
Yeah, they got an email today.
they got an email
Okay.
today that said if you don't respond back to all the comments by the next meeting, we'll be removing you from the agenda and you can resubmit.
Okay. Sounds good. Guys, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Michael, I want to adjourn.
Any objections? No objections, motion to adjourn. Really quickly, guys, just a reminder, next month, we are meeting on a Thursday
Oh,
because the Tuesday is a holiday, it's Rosh Hashanah, so, that is Thursday, I'll say 5th, but it's right. And the site visit, so those are 3 different days, 3 site visits, right?
So the doodle poll was sort of disastrous, so we basically said, let's pare this down a little bit. The vast majority of folks, and it's not just the planning BA, it's also the HPC,
right.
are available Friday, the 5th at 9 AM, so we'll advertise that.
Okay.
But then there were a couple stragglers who we're still waiting to hear from, and a couple folks who do not have availability that day. So we're gonna try to work with the Volter folks to have a second and possibly third option, but probably just a second option.
Okay.
And you'll tell us where to meet.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, I think we'll probably send out emails tomorrow.
Sounds good. And it is the 25th, next month, the meeting Thursday.
And Angelica will not be with us.
Yes, are you gonna,
Maybe I'll try for the 5th, I don't know. Think about it.
will you send us an email or a text and let us know?
Yeah, once I'm in a condition to do so.
For your top priority.
You'll be here next month, right?
All right, are we signing off?
We are signing off. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks, good night.
Any questions?
Jamie.